Well, my thoughts on vegetarians who drink alcohol. Alcohol is it depends on to what extreme the alcohol has been developed. But alcohol itself, especially once you go off like more than 5% and you get into wine and beer and liquor and these types of things, now you're creating a toxic environment in the body that the body now needs to try to neutralize. So the way that the body neutralizes these toxins is that it gives it something to feed on, or it gives it a sponge to soak it up. So traditionally, they say yes, a glass of wine is good with a certain meal. Yeah, it's good with a certain meal that wine is going to help to digest, help to break down. And the more extreme the alcohol you're going to find, then the more extreme the consumption of high dense animal protein. So it's not realistic for someone to be a vegetarian or even want to be a vegetarian and be consuming alcohol, because the alcohol needs a sponge, or at least it needs something to cook. It is fuel for fire. So if you don't give it some animal flesh to cook, then be careful, it may cook you. Cirrhosis of the liver is a real thing. So you notice the more alcohol you drink, the stronger the alcohol, the rarer you want your meat. And basically they go hand in hand. So the more meat you eat, the more alcohol you would want to consume. So be careful. Of course, culturing, is great, to be able to just lightly turn something into a vinegar acid base, whether it's fruits or herbs, and produce that culture that has those increased enzymatic activity in them that would help you to digest foods that you put into the body that are void of enzymes. But be careful also now, there's a lot of interesting cultured foods on the market in the vegetarian circle, things like kombucha, a freak weird so-called mushroom that was discovered in Siberia. And but anyway, we don't have to get into the kombucha specifically, but mushrooms are fungus. They're toxic detox, they're toxic release from the earth. And they're yeast factories. They're not really food for human consumption. So they create that acid environment in the body, and the body actually pollutes itself. It's the same thing when we consume certain foods that were not designed for the body, besides the mushrooms, when we consume things like cooked starches, complex carbohydrates, like deeply grown root vegetables, like yams and potatoes, and also certain grains, and certain beans or legumes that are high in starch. Now these foods, if we don't process them according to their nature, which is basically allowing the starch to be converted into sugar to turn into a simple carbohydrate by them digesting in the body properly. So if they don't digest, what happens? They ferment. And in the fermentation process, we produce alcohol. So many of us, we go irrational. We literally drunk, from making our own brew.